Okay, so right, so you should see two blue screens. I hope no one gets PST from Windows here. But anyway, so what we're going to talk a little bit about is how you can use Querqy with Swirl, and how we receive feedback about which terms were hit on which documents, and how that's incorporated into the relevance ranking that Swirl provides for federated search. So Querqy is a pretty powerful query rewriting tool available in OpenSearch, Elasticsearch, and Solr. My environment is configured with OpenSearch. We'll look at that first, just quickly look at how it's set up. This isn't really a demo about Querqy per se, but we'll look quickly at what my environment is set up like, and then we'll add some synonyms to Querqy. We'll configure Swirl to query that OpenSearch provider, and then we'll show it extracting synonyms from returned response from OpenSearch. So first off, setting up OpenSearch, very straightforward. So you can see my Docker file here, basically just starting off with the OpenSearch 2.30 image, and the only really change that you need to do is run the OpenSearch plugin installer and point it to the right version of Querqy. So you've got 2.30. With OpenSearch plugins, the plugin version numbers need to match the OpenSearch version number, which I think most people are familiar with, but worth noting here. So that's it. That's basically, we just run this Docker image locally, and you've got OpenSearch running with Querqy. So the only other sort of thing worth noting here is the data that I loaded. Maybe you noticed from my directory here is I loaded the Enron email data just for the purposes of this demo, and we use it a lot internally to sort of test things, or I do anyway. So let's now take a look at how you add synonyms to Querqy. So I've got this sort of in a shell script, but we'll take a look at the shell script quickly. So this is all wrapping around a curl call using a REST API. So Querqy is configured with a REST API where you basically tell it which of its 4 rewrite classes that you want to configure and what the configuration is. They have a very rich set of configuration options. We're going to just do something simple here for purposes of demonstration. So we are configuring the simple rewrite simple rewriter with a couple of synonyms here. We'll do personal computer to PC, PC to personal computer, a couple of other ones at the end just to sort of fill things out. And we'll just run this script now. And we got a 200 back, which shows that we succeeded. And because this is OpenSearch and everything is an index, you can just look at the content of the query configuration and see by looking at the OpenSearch Querqy index that we indeed have the rules that we just set up. So that looks good. And we can also do a quick demo quick query outside of Swirl to just show this working. So let's, again, we have a script, but we'll look at the script for a sec. Search dash demo. Right, so again, all window dressing around curl, and we see that this is a OpenSearch query. It's got 2 things that are worth noting. One is a highlighting section. That's important actually to Swirl, and we'll talk about why later. And you've got a Querqy section, which is just important for Querqy, of course, and it shows us basically using the common rules rewriter that we just configured, and give some boost to a couple of the fields. So a 3 from subject, 2 for 2, and content no boost, just one of the query fields. So yep, we can now run this script. Oh, sorry, one quick thing here. And you see here that we replace the query with the script parameters. So we can now search for personal computer. Probably gotta say which script we really want, right? And we can see that, again, this is all Querqy output, all OpenSearch output that we got hits on PC, even though we search for personal computer, and that just shows that the synonyms are actually working. So we're sort of ready to start accessing this from Swirl. So now we'll come over here and go to a Swirl directory that I already have cloned, and we'll start we'll do the setup from the beginning here because it doesn't take long. So we run our install script. And then we'll run the setup. This is just doing migrations. Anyone who's familiar with Django will sort of understand some of this output.
This is a typical Swirl startup right here.
Well, this is the, yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. And now we'll actually start. Okay, so I'm going to start the core. I start core because I only really need to start Django and Celery. I have Rabbit running on my machine all the time, so there's no reason to have Swirl start that. So now Swirl is starting. We'll just wait till it finishes. All right, very good. And now we should be able to go to local host. And we can. And the first thing I always do is log in, because you have to log in. Great. Okay, and now we'll go to search providers. So, that's all like very straightforward, very easy. So here's all the search providers that Sid was talking about. These are all come preloaded and pre-configured with everything, but of course, authentication info. So what I'm going to do is add a new one, and I'll show sort of how easy it is to add a new one while I'm doing that. And also just a clean slate so we can run some tests. So let's see. Okay, so let's just create this first, then we'll talk about it. Okay, so I just created a new search provider, so that's pretty easy. Now I cooked up the JSON ahead of time, but there's lots of examples to choose from. I think things that are worth noting here is that the query is really just the same query that we were looking at earlier from that script, with the exception that the query that gets substituted now comes from a query string substitution parameter that Swirl manages. And the other two pieces that are important, it's really one piece with two sub pieces, is we tell Swirl where to find the highlighted content that comes back from this provider. And this is configurable because it's going to change both per provider and per schema. So in this case, we tell it that the body hit highlights come from the content field and the title hit come from the subject field. So this lets us know where the synonyms are going to come back from when we do a search. So we've done that. So now let's do a search. Let me see if I can find my world here. Right.
Just to do a little commentary, that what you just did there is essentially a mapping, right? So you're pulling out, you're declaring where you're going to get that from, and then you're identifying where to pull the highlights from exactly in the mapping.
Right. So this is basically going to come back. This is pulling data from the search provider's JSON structure, and we're just telling Swirl what that structure looks like so it can find the content. It's a mapping, just as it said.
Exactly.
So we're going to do no worries. So we're going to do a notebook, a query for the term notebook. Some of the Google search providers have been a little slow today, so this might, yeah. There we go. Okay, so let's just stick with the Enron. So you can see we got our Enron data here. Let's see, the Enron time where is it? Was 0.4 seconds, which is pretty fast. We only got 381 results from that, and that's because basically notebook doesn't occur that very too often in this data set. So now let's go add another synonym. Let's go add a synonym for it in Querqy. So we got a script for that, but I'll just cat that, and then we'll have a look. Demo-2, and we're going to run this script. Okay, so now we updated those results, the Querqy configuration, and now we can see the Querqy configuration there. So now we have a synonym notebook for laptop, and now we'll do the same search, and you can see we got a lot more results back, like 1,000, so about three times as many. looking at the info you get back from each provider, we can see that the term that was pulled out of the provider's data structure was laptop. And we can see that we've got a number of good hits now from Enron for laptop in the subject, in the body, multiple times, or once here, but multiple times in these other ones. And we got our results were scored correctly, and the notebook term was scored correctly in the title and in the body when it's there. So, I mean, that's essentially it. So are there any questions or anything that people want to talk about here?
I just want to say, first of all, Dave, thank you for that. So I think the key point is this. When Swirl is meta searching across multiple sources, each of those sources has its own view of the world, its own business logic, taxonomies, ontologies, and absolutely synonyms, acronyms, all kinds of query transformations. And the key, what we've really done in 110, and Dave was far too modest to describe himself as a developer when you're the head of technology here. But the reality is that what we've added in 110 is receiving or detecting that business logic in the form of highlighted new query terms, adding those to not only to Swirl's highlighting, but also to the relevancy model, so that we really essentially Swirl learns, right, the variations. And in future versions, today we restrict the use of those variations to the source that reported them. But in the future, the fact that one silo said, well, you search for laptop, but you maybe really meant notebook or tablet, that is the idea where we could potentially share that data with other sources too, and perhaps improve the results across the field. So that's just one example, but I want to just emphasize this is a very powerful capability and not just a mapping. It's really much more about collecting that feedback, if you would.
Yeah, well said.
Awesome. Love to take any questions. Dave, thank you very much for that. I see we have a couple. So a question about Querqy as a rewriting framework.
So the question is, I just want to read it aloud for the webinar.
Please do.
René asks, as Querqy is a general rewriting framework, would you see a case for using Querqy for creating queries / adding synonyms for further search engines?
Oh,
So,
to use it. Oh, go ahead, Sid. You answer.
I would just say this. I think Querqy is used heavily in the open source community for rewriting, and particularly for e-commerce, but for other applications as well. I think it would be great if other search engines, particularly the commercial ones, would start to support it. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's something. It's a very powerful tool. It's something of a black box. It's only accessible through its REST API, although the configuration is accessible through the REST API as well. So certainly the synonyms are available for use in potentially other sources. But beyond that, I think some work would need to be done to use it for other purposes.
And I can say this, I think that when you're talking about meta search, we are very much focused on the query. You saw an example of how the adaptive query processor rewrites the query to optimize it for each of the receiving search engines. I think that in the future, you will see the ability to manage some of the query transformations on the Swirl side. So for example, if there's business logic that you would today want to pass down to other engines, that's something you could add now into our query pipeline. But in the future, that it could be something that we automate the process of. So I think it's a very exciting idea, and that's what meta search is all about: understanding the query and finding everything that everything else knows about it. Thank you. Great question. Any other questions from?
Yeah, thank you for that.
René had a follow-up asking, he was just saying he was thinking of the not case and how Querqy could be used there.
That's a really interesting idea. I don't know if Querqy supports the notion of the provider's capabilities, but it might be something where we could help it with that, actually. Maybe that's a very interesting idea. Dave, what do you think on that?
Yeah, it certainly has the capability to do that, but again, surfacing that capability for other engines seems like it would be more trouble than it would be worth. As far as handling the not, I think that there's other rewriting. For instance, the adaptive query processor handles it in some way, and we're working on features in the future to do rewriting sort of internally in Swirl that could handle that as well. But I think that that handling the not rewrite is sort of something that certainly that it's a one aspect of what Querqy could do, but I think trying to use it to work with other engines would be probably not worth the effort right now.
We're always looking at it, and I'd love to hear if you, René, if you have a particular case or example where you think would be interesting. In the meantime, you can definitely use the adaptive query processor with any endpoint that we talk to now. Well, I don't know if people can answer or not. Let me see.
Well, look at this. We're almost at an hour that we've come, and we're clearly really excited about the 110 product. And I see Sid, you brought in René, who was asking the question. René, if you want to join the conversation here.
Please do.
Thank you. So I have to admit, I'm the creator of Querqy, so that's why I asked those questions.
Cool.
So
Wonderful.
I wanted to know how it's being used, and I really like the ease of the integration as it seemed. So, but if you think about the design of Querqy, it has a core that is entirely search engine independent. So that means it has an object model and can express things like not and so on. And the object model represents the query. So I was thinking, in the end, you get a query string and then transform this query string into search engine specific query. So you might be able to use that object model. So that was a bit the background of this question.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I looked into this a little bit. It seemed that, well, so there's a lot of practical issues there. Like right now, the infrastructure that we have is mostly Python based. And I looked to me like, I know that I've looked at the Querqy core code. I think it's all Java, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So but that's not alone an impediment necessarily, but it's like more maybe a speed bump. Certainly, it's still doable.
Yeah,
it definitely has some possibilities.
Might be easier if you just use the means that you're currently using. I mean, the not transformation is not a big thing probably. But on the other hand, we found it quite useful to have this chain of rewriters and the pluggability of rewriters. So that comes to mind if you think, okay, I want to transform queries again and again. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, I think we've hit the top of the hour, so we do have to wrap up. But let's have that discussion offline. I think it's a super interesting one. That was really where we started when we first did this, right? Is that we should adopt this as a working way of modeling this capability, and let's talk about what we could do next.
Yeah, and René, we'd love to have you on another session as well. So it's a wonderful surprise to have you join, and it's just so perfect for our packaging with Querqy as well.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Listen, I think we'll thank everybody so much for coming. Really appreciate the time. Sorry for the miscues. We're still getting better at this whole webinar thing. I'd like to thank Megan very much from KMW. We're super excited about Spyglass, and we'll have lots more to show in 2 weeks at the next one. Thank you very much for coming. Please don't hesitate. Visit swirl.today or join our Slack if you want to participate. We're always welcoming to anyone who wants help or to contribute ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.